guys, this is Coaching Conversation, Sandra, Educational Innovation 360. Today we're talking about what do we need to do as instructional coaches to build the foundation of classroom routines for our teachers. Really thinking about what do they need day one and how do we get in there in the classroom modeling effective instruction for classroom routines. Hope you enjoy. How do I say this enough? Classroom routines matter. Students do well when they know the expected culture, expected behavior of teachers. We know with 20% more instructional time, if there's routines in place, there's a mental bandwidth, really thinking about how teachers are fatigued and tired, it definitely reduces that. And sometimes students can take on different initiatives in the classroom. And then thinking about what are our expectations for equity and background and experience and expertise. We have these predictable routines that will really take place and can really include power in the classroom when we have all of these opportunities available. Now, we know modeling is crucial. We have to do it with them, and we have to work with our teachers to make sure they feel safe and they can do it when we're not there. So whether you're modeling the routine, you're demonstrating the step, or you're doing a think aloud, all these are explicit ways to help nurture teachers and effectively showing them best practices. And then, of course, you can practice with the teacher and the coach and then guiding that instruction. And then you also have the observation where the teacher kind of does the routine, and then afterward there's a reflection, a debrief, and really thinking about what we need to do to improve. But what I found very effective is when we can actually work with the teacher, support the teacher in hand, or the observation, just depending on what each teacher is comfortable with. Think of what is your systematic approach for the first 2 minutes of class, right? Either there's a warm welcome, you're either greeting the students, you're saying their name, your handshakes at the door. What is your agenda? Maybe it's on the board, maybe your standard is on the board, so students know the objective and what they need to do by the end of the class so they understand the plan of the day, whether that's a smooth transition, a song, a hand clap to let students know when one activity is over and the other activity begins, and whether it's immediate engagement, meaning we do an activity at the beginning of the day, right? What are our do nows to make sure you come in, you look at the board, and you're already doing before I even get in the classroom. All of these are 2-minute quick sets to set the tone for the day to make sure your teachers are ready to set this expectations for when their students come. Now, some of our new teachers may think that visual supports don't matter. Really thinking about what is the visual component of the classroom that needs to be in place that teachers are making reference to. Coaches need to help our teachers with that. So whether it be anchor charts, right? How are we co-creating that visual? What does that look like? What does it sound like? And how do we duplicate that right now, real time? Like, what does that mean when we role play? So it could be created with student input as well. So consider that, whether we're posting it in relevant locations and we're making reference to it consistently. Even thinking about what does the visual schedule look like, whether it's always on the board. Students are always looking at it as a reference. These are powerful tools that help students kind of gauge their time throughout the day, whether it's agenda that's on Canvas, whether it's pictures that support all learners, and whether it's like different transitions that are built into the schedule as well. These are all great things that you can do for our students. And then the procedure posters. What does it look like? What does it sound like? How long does it take for the transitions to take effect? I remember one teacher, one of the things she did is kind of timed out a song. And now granted, this is elementary, but the students timed out the song. When the song was over, students need to be where they need to go, right? So thinking about how many steps does it take to get somewhere, and just being very precise and strategic about our classroom visual supports will help our teachers in everyday occurrences in their classroom routines. Now, I don't know how you feel, but I love transitions, right? But you think about the time it takes you to do something, pass out papers, get to one station, or just to finish an activity to line up to go home, right? So thinking about what is that signal? I always like to think it's a signal, it's a hand gesture, it's a movement, whatever the signal is that calls attention to this thing that you want students to do. Like making it explicit for our new teachers really helps them understand it as well as them carry it out after the role playing when you're working with your teachers. The direction, students need to understand the direction. I've even seen on some, like now granted, some of these are elementary school examples, but I've also seen it in high school as well, visuals on the board to let students know what to do next, whether to log into Canvas, what do they need to do after that, what video they need to log in. Those are usually in 2 to 3 places, 1 usually online, and then 2 usually on the board, right? So thinking about where you're putting the things for people to do. But thinking about directions, I've seen tape measured out like the blue tape measured out on the carpet to let students know the path that they're taking to get to a destination. And then, of course, the tape is removed once we've mastered that path. So really thinking about what does that look like, what is the timing, and then how does success look? I think this is another piece where I see new teachers struggle, the success criteria. How do we know that this is successful? And whether it's a count timer, like we need to do this in 7 seconds, or just a measure of some type. That way students know, well, if it is not in that time frame or that time limit, or I haven't turned the document in that time frame, then I know that this is the consequence, or this is not at the level that my teacher expects it. So a lot of teachers struggle with this, but I think really thinking about the debrief, right? Thinking about the big D, the debrief, like how did that go? What would you rate this routine? What would success look like? And then how can we do it better for next time? Really getting students in the mindset of thinking, okay, we did the thing. Now, how do we measure our growth and how do we continue growing past that? Now, granted, you're not going to pass out the papers in less than 2 seconds, but you can have a measurable time to where the students are passing back the papers and they beat the time. And so the teacher measured it for a certain period of time, and then we have that as the time to pass papers back, so we're not wasting instructional time. Now, these are my favorite. Building a classroom community. Community is big. So thinking about what is your student input when it comes to community, what is the morning meetings, how are you getting along with your students, or you are actually excluding yourself from the morning meetings because they already know how to conduct a morning meeting, they know your expectation. So thinking about what does that look like, your rituals that you have in your classroom, the opportunities for students to share your activities, daily messages that they understand that is through your lens, thinking of the roles that everybody has to play at the job, right? Their classroom jobs, and seeing how the roles match the routines and match the time frames. And same thing, what is the expectation? What does success look like? And thinking about what does rotation look like? Training, how does that even play a role in here? Who's training who? Students can train other students. Teachers can train other teachers. I've seen it where other classrooms can come in and train other students in different grade levels. So thinking about how do we constantly recognize this contribution for the job role. Maybe they get paid in some type of core cash or bucks. Maybe there is after the job is done, gratification by the teacher. So having all these things in place is really crucial to the success of your classroom community. And then thinking about your reflection practices. Whether you have your weekly class meetings where you're debriefing this, how does improvement look like after you have a discussion? How can students assess, students lead, and students take ownership of the evaluation process? And then what do we need to do to celebrate that we continue growing in the same manner? These are all the things that coaches must do in working with their new teachers. I threw all this out here because I think this is crucial. We're always talking about what is evidence-based coaching strategies. Many times as instructional leaders, we sometimes set our own measurement goals. And based on that, really thinking about how are we doing for ourselves as instructional coaches. What are we doing to actually model some of the behavior? How many models have you had in the school? What are you doing to increase buy-in? Coaching is all about building trust. How are you building that trust with your teachers? And what does that even look like? What are the practical examples of what that looks like? With the welcome routine, how are your teachers maximizing instructional time? And then how are you measuring that and say, hey, it took us 15 minutes to get this together, but we were able to do it in 7. I am so proud of you, right? And so thinking about getting our routines quick, concise, to the point, so we can, like I said, maximize instructional time. So here we go. Our anchor charts, what does that look like? Do we have clear instructions? What was the interpretation from the student? And what was the interpretation from the coach, maybe who's in the back that kind of observed the lesson and kind of saw the foggy look on some of the students' faces, or was able to kind of pinpoint how many students did the activity correct based on teacher guidance or teacher instruction. What are the jobs? Maybe we need to think about other jobs that are non-traditional. Maybe you have plants in your classroom. Maybe you have a fish, right? Thinking of what that assignment role looks like and what does the rotation of the jobs look like as well. And then, of course, what are we doing to celebrate how great we're doing? And what do we need to do to positive reinforce and to rah-rah and to celebrate the behaviors of the students, like our positive praise? What does our reward system look like? All of these are crucial, like I said, in order to build strong teachers with effective routines. All right, so here are some of our moves, right? We're talking about how do we validate? and then constantly encourage, right? And constantly pushing this learning curve for our new teachers, because we want to make sure they're continuously growing, thinking about the high impact and making sure we get the most out of our situations and scenarios. And then how do we do that? And really just focusing on some of the entry, the transition, and getting our signals down, or our call and response down, so students are responding to the motion, the movement, or the song, or the chant, or the saying, so we can get things done in a quick manner. How are we providing specific feedback? You know, hey boys and girls, it took us, like I said, 7 minutes to pass the papers back. I think we could beat our time. And then you actually having a timer and setting the time and having it count up, and then we do it 2 to 3 times. We take the best time, and then we said, if we did this, we can do this every time like this, and maximizing our time, because we want to focus on the implementation, the routine, and the progress. And then last but not least, thinking about how are we guiding, reflecting, and then adjusting this, because what we have noticed is, even though routines are introduced at the beginning of the year, sometimes when routines have not been consistent, when we come back after break or come back after the holiday, then it's time to do routines again. So sometimes we need a refresher to help our students with the routines. If you know anything about me, you know I'm big on action. What do we do now, Cassandra, right? So thinking about consistency, what does it look like for something being consistent, whether it's the entry in the classroom, it's the do nows, like thinking of one thing that we can do with our teachers, like what are they working on, what are they maybe almost successful with, where we can actually develop a SMART goal around that, and then time it or measure it in some capacity, and thinking of how do we make that goal consistent, and then move on to the next kind of classroom routine. And then of course we know daily practice makes perfect, and if not perfect, almost to our standards and expectation. And if it's not to your expectations for the teachers, then we practice doing it again, right? And it's okay to have your teachers practice doing it again for success, because it's the reinforcement, it's the daily reinforcement in the first couple of weeks that will kind of cement some of these skills that's landed. The expectations and making them visible is crucial as well, because we're talking about, like, what does the language look like? When I say this, you know this, the language is important as well. So thinking about, this is what our school class community looks like, and our relationships around these routines. And so we building a classroom culture, and we're making sure our students get exactly what they need, and that's maximizing instruction. Hope these tips help. Talk to you later for more. If you need more information, DM me. Talk to you later. Bye.